All right, this is March 31st, 2025, Infinite Plane Society Morning Deprogram. So it's a Monday, and this is the schedule, Monday to Friday. About this time, we will be live to talk about what's going to be the subject of the evening. Now, there's a lot of world stage news to talk about, and a lot of new developments with the IPS, but this evening, my focus is a course that I'll be giving 7 p.m. Mountain Time on AI tools, AI for the noobs basically, but the tools that I've used and how I use it. And there's a couple of reasons I'm doing this. One, I want to get everybody who's in the IPS up to speed with what I'm doing as far as using the tools available for mass media deconstruction, PSYOP, documentation, retro, auto-hoaxing, etc. But also, it's advancing so fast that if you get on it now, you're already going to be ahead of the curve. But it's not going to go away, and I think it would behoove you to learn, if you're not using it now, why you should, and to make it part of your daily life, because it is about efficiency, as all tools are. You know, it's like it's been mystified. It's been turned into something scary. So some people think AI is some kind of a higher power waiting to be let loose to save us. Others think it's the devil. No, it's just a more sophisticated search engine, word processor, the predictive text, the image generation technology. This is all stuff that has explanations. If there was a higher power involved, if there were demons involved, then somebody would have noticed by now, because every component of everything that we have is trademarked, is profiting somebody somewhere. You know, you look at the iPhone. It's like, well, I can't explain how everything works on the inside. Well, somebody there has designed every little minute component. So there's no mystery here. And one of the things we've been focusing on is the demystifying news. If you're mystifying news, you are looking at it through a very narrow lens, thinking that if I can't explain it, it must not be explainable, and therefore I can insert a higher power to do so. Well, no, that's the divine fallacy. And the people who are looking at AI as sentience are falling for that fallacy. And I see it quite a bit. It's actually kind of humorous at times, but I think it's actually, if I was an alien anthropologist, you know, I would just look at it as a religious impulse. You know, people read a holy book when they're looking for answers, and it's easy for them to conceive of it as having been written by a higher power, even if it was written by L. Ron Hubbard. And it goes the same with AI. You know, people get this response that, yeah, it is actually kind of, you know, it feels magical. It's like, wow, how does that happen? It's incredible. But again, it's just human nature to be bewildered. Life can be bewildering. It's wonderful and amazing. But part of the big spell that has been cast over mankind has been this illusion. This illusion that so many things are unexplained, and we're therefore left to the mercy of the priesthood to parse it for us. So we're dispelling illusions here. So that's one reason to do this. Another reason is just the practical reasons. I mean, I've been coming up with some pretty useful applications for various things. I've been working with fiction and nonfiction, and I've also been doing it for research purposes, because the Ministry of Truth is going to memory hole everything. And those of us who notice connections have been called crazy, obsessed. These are meaningless. I've been told, I mean, I've heard, and this is not to name names, but there are people who think AI is some kind of mystic higher power who have accused me of reading too much into things, of, oh, those are some connections, but what does that mean? Well, again, just because we don't have the big picture doesn't mean there isn't one. And then we have to have a simplistic, oversimplified explanation for it. So yeah, we've noticed a lot of connections between the number 33 and all these various psyops. But we've also noticed one-to-one correlations between a psyop and the entertainment and real-time drills in the neighborhood. So we're noticing patterns to see where they lead, to see what shows up. But we don't have enough information to have a complete model. And that's where they're wrong. Those who think that these are merely coincidences but falsely believe they have a complete model. Like, oh, my model is this. The media reports, we react, any connections are purely coincidental. The alternative model says these connections are the result of we're in a big video game. Well, your video game model is premature, and if that's your starting point, you're going to, through cognitive bias, only choose data which bolsters your particular preconceived model. My model when it comes to media is open-ended. I don't have a complete model yet. I'm still gathering information. So just because I don't know specifically what the number 33 is, what its significance is, doesn't mean it's insignificant, that it's a meaningless thing to point out. I'm very comfortable not knowing everything, and I don't have to claim to know everything. I think that's where this conversation really leads. What can we claim to know versus what do we only think we know? And that's a big part of what skepticism is. And it requires a great deal of honesty to be able to say, I don't know. And people with complete systems don't say that. I may not know, but it's in my book. I may not know, but I can just point to the right news agency to fill that in. No, if you're outsourcing perception, then you're at the mercy of those who are providing that bit of information. You have to trust that they're not biased, maybe for some ulterior purpose. You have to be naive, in other words. So one of the things we're using AI for is making sense of all this research. We have so many examples. And I used this recently with Perplexity. And I'll talk about all these different tools. So Perplexity is a search engine that delves into multiple sources, puts it all together in a way like a research assistant could. You give a good research assistant, and this is what we would do in our think tank. Our think tank was doing the job that AI does. If you have 20 people digging into a subject and dropping the most relevant information into a thread, yeah, that's what Perplexity does. But it does it in seconds. So if and I'm not saying, Perplexity is going to replace the think tank. No. If the think tank uses Perplexity, it magnifies our power. AI will not be replacing people. People who use AI will be replacing people that do not. And if Trutherville is going to remain confused and terrified and bewildered by this new technology, they're not going to get out. In fact, if you look into the dominant paradigm's alternative religion of simulation, moral relativism, scientism, Gnostology, a sentient computer is right in the script. This has been the subject of science fiction for a long time. This is something they want you to believe. The powers that be need you to have a personal God, a personal savior, a personal connection to the sim. And this is it. This AI thing. We've been talking about this for some time, since the WEF, the World Economic Forum, put out this thing called Gaia, which again, Gaia, Earth God, the Global AI Alliance, about how it would be globally connecting everybody. And I thought, wow, globally connected, Gaia, AI, seems like Pandora, Avatar, the Navi plugging into the sentience of the planet. So we saw this coming, but see, just like they mystify holy books. Let's not forget, we're in a scientific paradigm, but the powers that be are all about religion and mystifying books. Yeah, this book was written by a higher power. It is therefore authoritative and higher than man, and fully explains everything, A to Z. See, that's just not true. Opinions aside, holy books do not live up to their advertisement. It's all false advertising. None of them can be authentically proven to have been penned by a higher power. Just people claiming it. And if that's the way they want us to perceive the religious paradigms, because it's all about worldview, then of course they're going to want us to mystify AI, to be bewildered. And it doesn't matter if web developers and people who use it know better. The masses are still going to be in the dark. A lot of them. I mean, specifically the trutherville types. And those who just don't care. The types of people who believe, low information believers. Those who want to believe. Low information believers and the desire to believe that they have explains quite a lot about this world. But back to the AI. So there's some trepidation people have about using it for art generation, which I somewhat understand. When I first got into airbrushing, I was doing airbrushing for a couple of years when I was doing murals. And I stopped because it was too expensive. It was just noisy. I hated the air compressor and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was an incredible tool. But at the same time, I was learning Photoshop. And I was subscribing to all these different airbrush magazines. And I went and I found this article by one of the top airbrush artists in the world at the time. And his work was incredible. And he said something just kind of on like off the cuff, and it just took me by surprise. He said that he had not touched an airbrush gun in years because now all he does is digital and he doesn't sell originals. And I was like a little disappointed. I'm like, you're telling me that the best airbrush artist doesn't even do airbrush anymore? It's all digital? And when airbrush came out, people thought it was cheating, that it was mechanical, that it was going to take the soul out of art. But anyway, when I saw that, I was like, okay, that's a sign. So I jumped deeper into digital art. I'm not a bitter clinger. But it's not going to replace the old mediums, nor does it replace creativity. And if it was that simple, everybody would be using it and creating great works of art and great works of literature. And I have worked with, so the next thing will be creative writing, because the research stuff, nonfiction, easy. Infographics, I've got some leads, some instructions, some tools where we could take this conversation, just the transcript from it, take 20 minutes, feed the transcript to Perplexity or ChatGPT and just say, hey, would you break this down into a synopsis with bullet points and 2 direct quotes? 5 seconds later, you have that. And then you copy and paste it again into a different app that I know of, which does infographics. And you say, provide me an infographic with illustrations and bullet points with this particular synopsis. So you go from a podcast to a transcript, synopsis, to an infographic in a matter of minutes. And it's so streamlined. But my point here is that you can take vast amounts of information and take the key points and offer it in a simple way. And infographics speak to people who conceptualize things visually. You know, for me, it's hearing it. For others, it may be more visually. Others have to do things. There's just different modes. So I'm working on also Deep L. I have a couple of other ones. There's a text to voice, voice to text stuff. And then AI agents. You know, various bots that are, bots don't even explain it. Especially if you're dealing with an AI agent that is more knowledgeable than any person on the subject. It's not just a chatbot. And then I'm also working with automation. So, for example, I have a Drudge Report style website, Auto Hoax Report. Actually, it's just the Hoax Report, but it's autohoax.com. And it is going to be automatically, through updated, real simple syndication, updating all the links from all the different sources that I'm choosing, mostly people who are on the same sheet as us. And then the bot will be scraping all those links and creating a press release, an infographic, and some kind of a daily breakdown newsletter of what we're going to be discussing or what has been discussed the previous day. But, you know, when you automate these things, It's like having a newsroom. And instead of going to different blogs and podcasts and listening and taking notes, this stuff does it all in an incredible amount of time. And it's not perfect right now, but it's gonna be. Like, it's only gonna get better. It's accelerating. So we get in now, we implement these things now. Even if the flyers have a few misspellings, even if the writing isn't perfect right now, if you can work with rough drafts, if you can work with something that's 90% there and take the rest right now, that's just a little bit of work. And in a few months, it won't even be a thing. And so the objective here, though, is what has been the objective the whole time: disrupting Trutherville. And I have no problem debunking somebody's religion. We're always attacking the state religion. We're always taking down Nasatology's fake model. That's what we do. And for some reason, and I guess it's because of the habit and tradition and communities and subcultures, but for some reason, the rebellious attitude towards mainstream is only one way. And all these people who see mainstream as the enemy never look at the controlled opposition right next to them. And they should. And they won't until they come to an understanding of off-world stage and how they've been played. If you're mad about 9/11, you've been played. If you're mad about 2020, you've been played. If you're in any anti-position, yeah, you've been played in a game that you didn't know you were playing and you lost. If you've swallowed any fear pills, if you've spread them, you've got mind aids, or you're a propaganda mule. These are losing positions. Mainstream worldview is a passive position for naive, gullible, brainwashed, and manipulatable sheep who can be triggered and programmed to react predictably. I mean, look how many people today are attacking Tesla Roadsters. I mean, this is psychopathy, and this is mob mentality, and it's programmed. So you don't have to be afraid of AI bots or any of that. You got to worry about your lefty friends being triggered by memes. They may as well be robots. But it's going to ramp up. The Psywar is ramping up, and it's going to be ramping up on both sides. And so I think it would be wise to sidestep it. Like, this is the time. You know, we're no longer quarantining the off-world stage. We're opening it up for those who can make it. The nice thing about it, though, is you can't fake it. You can't fake like you know what's going on. You can fake being a truther. It's easy to fake being a normie in terms of the blue pill worldview. I do it all the time. I live in a blue pill world. I know some red pillars. I know some people who there, but like, I understand these different worldviews and I can bounce between them easily. But the one thing that blue pillars cannot even comprehend doing is off-world stage. And another thing too is the more set in their ways, the less they can entertain a hypothetical. Like, well, maybe all this stuff is fake. And they'll say, but it's not. No, well, maybe it is, but it's not. Well, can you entertain for 30 seconds the possibility that it is a conditional hypothetical? So then we can then say, if so, then what? They can't go that far. That's the edge. The edge is where the person will not go any further because they're afraid of falling off. We used to call it edgeophobia. People who, the flat earth groups who would not talk about going to Antarctica, we used to call them edgeophobes. Like, oh, you're afraid of going to the edge. You're afraid of having your model challenged. Whether you're right or wrong, you shouldn't be afraid. And I see the same edgeophobia when it comes to worldview. And normies, you can drag them to the edge of Trutherville. They'll entertain it, they'll take a step in, and they'll run back. Now, you take a truther to the off-world stage, you can take them in a couple steps, and if they can entertain the hypotheticals and be critical, then maybe you can have that paradigm shift. I looked at the Fool, the tarot card, the Fool. He's about to step off a cliff. It's the beginning of the Fool's journey. He's got the 0 above his head because it's the 0 card. And it represents the beginning. The 0 is like an egg. It's the starting point. The Hebrew character associated with that card is the first one, Aleph. It's the ox, the beginning of civilization and agrarian organized societies. And the stepping off the cliff means stepping into the darkness, or that which hasn't been enlightened for you yet, going into the area of ignorance. It's all symbolic, confronting the ignorance. And if you don't, and this is where the powers that be control us, if you're afraid to go outside of the model, then they can tell you what's outside of it. Oh, it's outer space. Just a bunch of space rocks and aliens and radiation. Or no, outside of that, just lies and conspiracies and extremism. Oh, outside of the village is just monsters and wicked people. It's a containment device. The model is a container. It's a closed system. Ever since, even in 2017, I said, when we started this thing, I said, the question's not shape. It's about systems, open versus closed. Flat and globe are closed systems. The very idea of infinite plane is to emphasize the open system. And we're not just talking about geography. In fact, geography is irrelevant compared to the mental open versus closed. You can get off the grid, hide in a bunker with your MREs, your ammunition, your Bibles, and your ham radio and stuff. You're on the grid because you're only hiding because you believe in a bunch of lies that have you terrified. There's no reason to go into hiding for the end of the world. So the person who thinks they're off the grid is actually 100% dependent and on the grid. You can't be off the grid unless you're off it mentally. And I would say that if you have seen through alt media deception, then you're off the grid. Truth reveal is a deception. Like we could say climate change is a deception to advance a political agenda, to push back against free market capitalism, to set the precedent for a new scientific paradigm that gives ultimate control to the power elite's worldview monopoly. Yeah, you could say but why wouldn't you say the same about the alternatives? And this is where the truthers are blind. And this is what the objective is. There's a huge box, big closed system. A lot of people saw it as such and they ran, but they just ran into a different closed system. It's smaller. It's scarier. We call it MSM plus, the conspiracy realm. Well, that conspiracy realm has a lot of people in it with a lot of time and a lot of energy, and they're being used in the Psywar. Their own self-preservation, their own desire for truth, and I guess an understanding of how things work is being subverted. We're talking about good intentions being directed towards their own enslavement and further deception. That's a lot of people. And I don't really put numbers on it, but there are a lot of people. Let's just be very, very conservative and say there's 100,000 truthers who could easily be turned against Trutherville. And that's what we want. We need to turn truthers against Trutherville, but not with this either or fallacy that if you're not a truther, you're mainstream. No. This is why I say it's anti-pro, anti-anti. It wasn't enough to go against mainstream. Now you have to go against the alternative. And if you're not against alternative, we're against you. The off-world stage is against the mainstream as it is against the alternative. And if you're pushing false flag theory, if you're pushing real nukes or any of these other mainline conspiracy positions, you're my ideological opponent. We are enemies. And that's fine. We can coexist. And I just mean enemies in the arena of ideas, in the Psywar. You're a Psywar monger if you're in that side, and I'm not. If you're a death clinger, if you're pushing atrocity propaganda, you're on Team Big Brother. It's unconscionable. You've got the moral low ground, and you're operating out of a place of ignorance. And the truthers are all guilty of this and need to be called out, specifically the influencers. But it's not, they get berated by the mainstream for being conspiracy theorists all the time, but the mainstream has no room to talk because they're worse. So you got bad and worse. I mean, they're equally deceived, but at least the truthers have good intentions because they're trying to find the truth, ostensibly. So my intention is this. We appropriately criticize Trutherville and all of its residents. And if the shoe fits, they can stay with it. They can defend it. But if they have a conscience and if they have good intentions, then of course they can off board. They can exit. They can get onto the off-world stage perspective. It's a paradigm shift, maybe a paradigm shock. But if you don't make that shift and you're still there in 2025 in Trutherville, you're a fool. And you're playing a losing game. And I call it influencers who are part of it. And we describe these various compartments people are in. But now beyond just diagnosing the problem, now we have to solve it. We have to be a disruption. So if you look at media as an ecosystem, we have to look at these ecosystems as, these different boxes as obstacles to be overcome or to be disrupted. And so the model needs to be broken. The alternative media model of the world needs to be shattered and all of its presuppositions. And some of the things that hold it together, the big things, aside from like fake weapons of mass destruction and the political horseshoe, another one of the big things that glues this together is a non-understanding of concurrent programming drills and their relevance to the fake news. Not understanding news bending and the logical assumption of a pre-existing script, the so-called meta script. These are the barriers, but we have the answers, we have the evidence, and the AI is only going to bring that evidence out faster. If this is beyond typecasting, it's propaganda, but it's a very sophisticated form of propaganda that they get away with because there are laws and rules when it comes to subliminals and such, but PR stunts aren't exactly the same as subliminal, but I think there's a blind spot that we have collectively that it's like a loophole that the government of the world, and I say government singular, has a worldview monopoly exercised through all major media platforms, entertainment and otherwise. And that there's time control exerted by the synchronization of the releases of content to correspond with the news. And it's not anomalous as we are documenting repeatedly. And the documentation process is something that I've been working on for some time. We've been trying since 2020. We tried our first forum. Let's expose all the hoaxes going back 100 years, but we just haven't had the manpower. And we're talking about unpaid research. This is basically volunteer work. And we don't have funding for this type of stuff. Same thing with other projects. I have this animation project, I have a script, and I've been working on it. And I realized at one point, I'm either going to have to somehow get this funded with a Kickstarter, or I'm just going to have to wait a couple years for the AI stuff to develop to where I don't need to rely on outside help. And we're there now. This is a huge leveler. It's a leveling of the playing field that an individual, a single person like me, now has the capacity, if I had even a meager budget, to run a newsroom with a daily news aggregation / press release and a publishable paper weekly, if not more. I mean, if I had like I said, a meager budget for printing costs, yeah, it could be daily newspapers with this is crazy to even talk about. The scale of it is what is incredible here. Just as an example, I came across this AI tool where you can have a subject, and I'll go through this tonight. In fact, I'll go through this tonight. Let's say you wanted to do a subject on, or a blog on a certain topic. We'll just say surrealist landscape art, because you're selling surrealist landscape art. There's a tool that will write and publish 100 search engine optimized, well-written, scholarly articles and fill up your blog with a click. And then these Articles are designed to get search engine attention, and then they're including affiliate links to sell stuff. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, these are some pretty powerful tools, and it's a major game changer. It really is. But my objective here is to get more people involved in the research end and the art. We were cutting edge with memes, and then of course animation. But now the cutting edge is moved forward, and so we're going to move forward with it. Anyway, thanks for your time. The course is going to be tonight at 7. Go to ips.monster. You'll find the link. And if you're not able to make it tonight, because it's like a 2-hour course, and it's not public, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this course, and then I'm going to parse it into segments, which I will likely release publicly. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it on the IPS channel or on a separate channel altogether. I think I'll keep it together. I see no reason not to keep it consolidated. But I'll probably release a series of like 15-minute tutorial videos on each of the topics that I go through. Because I've been doing a lot of this. I mean, honestly, I've been immersed in it for the last couple months. But I've been using it since it's come out. And, you know, like a lot of people experimenting with different things. But I've been producing a significant amount of content, and I've actually put it into my workflow. So, like one more example really quick. I take my live streams, I use this to give me a transcript and put a synopsis below the video with relevant links. So if somebody's searching, they want to know what it's about. Like a lot of these big podcasts have producers and assistants who listen and write a synopsis. And so you go to these polished podcasts and it's like, okay, this is what it's about. Here are the relevant links. Well, I don't have the producer. I don't have assistants, but with this, I can perform as good, if not better than them with just a few clicks, and it's automated. So I'll go through all these examples. It'll be very educational. You'll certainly get your money's worth and time's worth. And hopefully it'll bring a lot more people into the Auto Hoax forums and the wiki, because we're just a few hundred articles away from one of the objectives here. My objective is the autohoax.com is going to be the internet's largest database of PSYOP deconstruction. And these articles will be the event, relevant predictive programming, all citations, relevant drills, its interconnectedness to other events through narrative, and through the involvement of specific individuals, news entities, and agencies. So we've made the case. Like, we do have the right model. We have done a course correction, and Trutherville is not in the right direction. It's a dead end. We figured this out. So now it's time to move forward. So thanks for your time, and we'll see you this evening.